What is the creepiest thing you've ever seen in a nightmare? Was it an old hag? Spiders crawling across your walls? Or maybe a tall, dark man just watching you? Would it make you feel better or worse to know that other people see these things too? That these nightmares, creatures, entities, they appear consistently in people's dreams or psychedelic trips, breaking cultural and geographical barriers. Maybe you've never even really seen these things, but you're just interested in them, interested in hearing other people's stories and encounters. If that's you, you're in luck, because today we're going to be going over the Shared Hallucinations iceberg created by Lee Dade. This iceberg focuses on shared hallucinations, meaning creatures and things that consistently surface in dream and trip reports. Some are just entities in general, but others are associated with very specific drugs. These creatures are even theorized by some to perhaps be real. But they're all really interesting, and as we go deeper, we'll visit some psychonaut lore and things you've probably never heard of before, so make sure to watch until the end. We're about to get into the beginning of this iceberg, but quickly, I just want to let you know that if you're interested in icebergs or other creepy content, that you should subscribe to the Sea Butter channel to make sure you're ready for uploads when they come. Also, consider joining my Patreon so you can watch this video a day early, just like my excellent Patreon members. For now though, it's time to start the video with our very first tier. Shadow people. This is an extremely broad first entry. Shadow people come in all shapes and sizes, popping up in different settings. You might see a glimpse of a shadow person just walking around at night, or maybe in a dark basement, maybe even when you get up at 4 a.m. to get some water. Seeing shadow people is an incredibly documented phenomenon, and it's something that's even shown up in scientific research, literature, and art in all sorts of cultures. For some, they're considered jinn, or ghosts, or spirits. In a survival situation, if there's something in the dark that could be the outline of a person, it's advantageous for your brain to go ahead and tell you that it's real, so you can get away from the threat. There are other scientific explanations for shadow people. First of all, they can be caused by legitimate psychological disorders like schizophrenia. But of course, they are common for everybody. Some propose that heightened emotional states or stress can make it more likely to perceive a shadow person. They're also associated with sleep paralysis and the use of certain drugs such as meth or diphenhydramine. In fact, it's extremely common in meth users to the point that a psychologist who worked with patients in rehab suggested that the use of meth adds a, quote, conspiratorial component to sleep deprivation hallucinations. So basically, the drug keeps you awake long enough to see things, and then you perceive those things to be people. People who might be out to get you. This psychiatrist, Jack Potts, that's a cool name, conducted interviews amongst users of the drug, with one stating, "You don't see shadow dogs or shadow birds or shadow cars. You see shadow people. Standing in doorways, walking behind you, coming at you on the sidewalk." Using substances and being sleep deprived are very easy ways to see shadow people, but this is also a broad entry. It's sort of like just saying ghost. Lots of different cultures and mythologies and stories involve shadow people in some regards, so it's impossible to nail down just one definition. The roommate. The roommate, who could perhaps be a shadow person himself, is described as a generally benevolent figure that you hallucinate as being in the room. This is typically associated with the use of DPH, basically Benadryl, but it's also something you can encounter when you're sleep deprived. The main reason that they're referred to as the roommate is because they're a pretty chill guy, or girl, and basically just someone you can talk to about your day. They're not often considered evil or anything like that. The man in the doorway. Once again, another subform of shadow person. The man in the doorway refers to a specific hallucination or nightmare where you see someone standing, well, in your doorway. They're often seen during nightmares, or while under the influence of deliriums, or if you're incredibly sleep deprived. They're known for doing nothing but staring, and don't usually talk or make any noise, but they're reported as being very lifelike, which makes them even scarier. I, for one, absolutely have had nightmares about someone just standing in my door, so I can vouch for this being real. I think what's creepy about it, and maybe symbolic, I guess, if you're into symbolic dreams, is that being in the doorway, they're right in the passageway to get to you. They're halfway between you and something else, whatever's behind your door. Of course, they also could just be something you see if you're tripping on Benadryl. Talking walls. Talking walls are, well, just that, talking walls. If you've ever watched trip simulations and see the walls sort of moving or being anthropomorphized in some way, like having small mouths and also hearing whispers, that's sort of what I'm describing. These are associated with drugs like cannabis and DPH, but can also show up in general nightmares or if one is sleep deprived. They're also mentioned as something you can see if you're just totally alone in a room or if you're having withdrawal symptoms. NO2 helicopter. The NO2 helicopter is a purely auditory hallucination associated with using nitrogen oxide. Nitrogen oxide, in its drug form, refers to whippets or those balloons filled with gas. Basically, you're getting high by depriving your brain of oxygen. Your body doesn't know that nitrogen is bad generally, so you can keep breathing it until you get really calm and, well, feel high. When doing this, some people describe feeling a gust of wind, or as if they were being lifted off of their feet. The helicopter feeling, or helicopter effect, as this one article describes it, is like being right under a helicopter, hearing it thump and feeling air. I actually know a guy from college who did this, and he described it as the womp womps, meaning he felt as if the inside of his head was going wom, 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 wom. The Hat Man. The Hat Man is an extremely well-known trip entity. He can show up during any psychedelic trip or nightmare, but he's most associated with Benadryl/diphenhydramine use. I talked about this extensively in my Benadryl Iceberg, but basically he's entered the community consciousness as well. There are all sorts of memes about the Hat Man and such. All of this only makes it more likely that he'll show up in people's nightmares and continue to propagate the legend. He's often described as a somewhat malevolent entity, usually feeling like some sort of male authority figure. But he's also described as collected and careful, not really approaching you or speaking to you, but sort of just standing there or maybe approaching you slowly. Some people suggest he actually feeds off of fear, which is why he watches, because he knows you're scared. But if he were to do anything outright, you might stop seeing him, so he doesn't do that. He takes as much of your time as he can. Machine elves. Machine elves is a term first coined by Terence McKenna, a researcher who was an early advocate for the responsible use of natural psychoactive substances. He came up with the name machine elf, describing them as creatures he saw while using DMT. According to him, they were intelligent, self-transforming entities. People report seeing them while under the influence of DMT, perhaps while using ayahuasca specifically. They can appear as 2- or 3-dimensional figures, but the major characteristic I see about them is that whatever they're made of seems to change. They appear elvish really only in behavior and stature, and don't necessarily look like fairy tale elves. I found this story on Reddit from u/name-done-letter, which reads, "Well, I got in contact with some elves/pixies/fairies/spirits, hard to say what exactly, in my second ceremony. They seemed to be 2D light creatures, with robotic body parts. Some had vehicles for bodies. They were very friendly at first. They were making objects out of ideas / language / light, and they wanted me to give them something. I didn't know what they wanted, and they started to get annoyed. Eventually, I understood that they wanted me to show them what I know. So, I gave them philosophical ideas that I had read, but then they eventually wanted me to give them something original. One of my ideas, and I had no ideas of my own. Or at least, that's what I had thought and communicated with them. They became angry and went inside my body and eventually came out with this object and told me, This is your inner wisdom, your original work. They gave me back the object, but took everything else. These seem to be a pretty common hallucination for those who use the drug, supporting the idea that some people have that DMT actually opens a door into a different realm, as evidenced by these visions being consistent. James Kent, who has authored some books about the use of psychedelic substances, offers an interesting explanation. He suggests that machine elves are how the brain explains the changing scenery when using these substances, basically saying that because the visual landscape is changing so irregularly, and because the brain likes anthropomorphic figures, it generates machine elves to sort of show you that the background is changing via little people moving stuff around, if that makes sense. They've also been discussed on the Joe Rogan show.
You're breaking the veil. You are perceiving the 4D space.
Maybe. But that's all you could ever say.
Opium bird. Opium birds are described by users of opium, morphine, laudanum, and other similar depressants as a dreamlike bird that appears while, dreaming. If they speak at all, they tend to be mysterious, doing so from afar, or speaking via riddle. There's also a VFX artist who generated an AI video which shows this creature, which to me looks more like a polar bear than a bird, that he titled Opium Bird. This meme has sort of hijacked the name, and it honestly makes it a little bit harder to research the actual opium bird. But to my knowledge, there's no real reason for this namesake. It's just the shared name, that's where the similarities end. The ones described by users of depressants do not look like this. This is just a meme. Cigarette guy. The cigarette guy, depending on the interaction, might be a shadow person, and they're very similar to the roommate I described earlier. You might see them in a dream or hallucination, but it's especially associated with the use of DPH. He offers you a smoke, leading to a phenomenon known as a phantom cigarette. Basically, across different drugs and trip reports, there is a known phenomenon called a phantom cigarette. It's very common to hallucinate an imaginary cigarette while using DPH, Datura, or stuff like that. And this isn't just for smokers. It's been reported by smokers, non-smokers, and ex-smokers alike. There's a 2008 post on the Vaults of Arrowwood website that has a collection of self-reported examples of this phenomenon. In one, a guy describes people trying to pick up their phantom cigarettes off of the floor. One person described it as falling out of their hands every time they bring it to their mouth. So, you don't really need to encounter the cigarette guy to have an imaginary cigarette, but as you might expect, these hallucinations tend to go hand in hand. A funny coincidence that someone on Reddit brought up, which I don't think by any means is a real mechanism but still cool, is that nicotine and deliriants tend to have opposite effects. DPH lowers the brain's ability to respond to acetylcholine, whereas nicotine actually produces acetylcholine. So he suggested that the brain is subconsciously producing the antidote to their trip. This would only really make sense for smokers though, or people who understood the mechanism behind it, so I don't really think it makes sense on its own. Ceiling crawlers. Ceiling crawlers are people, bugs, children, or other creepy things that crawl about on the ceiling, and they're mostly associated with deliriants, especially DPH. These can be very creepy and incomprehensible, but in general, it's really just seeing things on the ceiling. I guess if you were hallucinating and you laid down and looked up, you would just see stuff on the ceiling. Mannequin people. Mannequin people are associated with deliriant use and also schizophrenia. However, people report them showing up in normal nightmares and even real paranormal encounters. At the bottom of it, these are just humanoid entities with no face. The librarian. The librarian can be encountered by those who use dissociatives like ketamine or DXM. It's described as a stern authority figure who watches over a library or maybe something else protected, some sort of vault or secret information. They may give you a book, which might have unreadable content. Jesters. Jesters are exactly that. They are tricksters that may mock or confuse you, and are very similar in a lot of ways to the machine elves, insofar as their physical appearance may be difficult to pin down, but they have that small little confusing creature quality. They're associated with LSD, DMT, and psilocybin trips. Occasionally, these are referred to as fractal clowns. They show up very frequently in trip reports. What's really interesting about these in particular is that the jester is a very common archetype in human literature. Jung, for example, talks about the jester or trickster in his writing. Across culture, the idea of a trickster pops up a lot. Traditionally, and to this day in some shows and movies, the jester is the only one who gets to make fun of the king. So some people take it to mean that the jester is the one who gets to criticize you or point out your flaws. Since people are very familiar with the idea of it, it's easy to see why they might hallucinate them a lot. Some people say that the jester guides people while tripping, or tells them to relax and have more fun in life, or otherwise just stop you from being so tense. I've heard one person say that you have to give in to him a little bit and act funny, or else he'll just leave you alone. Almost as if he doesn't want to waste his time with people who are rigid and who won't have a little bit of fun. Doppelgangers. These are associated with DPH, sleep deprivation, and even just dreaming in general. I mean, how many times have you seen yourself or someone you know in a dream? These are some of the more easy to understand entities, potentially. They might not speak to you in riddles, and you might just interact with them normally, potentially reflecting on experiences you've had with these people, and they might even advise you on what to do in your life. Or you might even be talking to someone who's no longer in your life, and you get to say something to them that provides you closure. Now, what's really hard to know is if these are actually entities posing as people, or just your memories showing up in a hallucination. Some people describe feeling as if they know that the doppelganger is another creature that's just somehow hijacked their memories to present themselves as a real person, but is not actually a memory or a dream about that person. They're like wearing their skin, I guess. So in that regard, this can sort of refer to two different things. Hellhounds. Hellhounds, associated with DPH, meth, and nightmares, are beastly creatures resembling dogs, potentially shrouded in shadow or are entirely shadows. I myself have had nightmares about dogs chasing me, so again, for me, this kind of checks out. I've read a few mentions of these in DMT trip reports and such. Generally, as you might expect, these are considered very negative hallucinations and are scary. Hellhounds are a very common real-life paranormal sighting, and they're wrapped into legends and literature all around the world, so it's very possible that these are common hallucinations because they're so frequently discussed. Apparently, and this is really odd and obscure, but seeing a black dog is sort of part of trucking lore. It's something that American truckers describe seeing on the side of the road, but that's associated with their use of speed or sleep deprivation. The Soft Lady. The Soft Lady is described as a feminine or maternal presence that comforts you. And while it could show up at really any time or dream, or when you're sleep deprived, it's commonly associated with opioid use. Once again, a comforting woman is a massive literary and cultural trope, so this being common isn't too unreasonable. The Laughing Light. The Laughing Light is associated with cannabis and LSD, and also sleep deprivation. I find this one pretty interesting. The laughing light can be an orb that appears, or a real actual light somewhere around your environment, which appears to be judgmental or mocking, maybe laughing at you. This one stood out to me because when I had my wisdom teeth removed, I first got laughing gas, and then about 15 minutes later, I had an injection which put me to sleep. And I vaguely remember the dental light sort of pulsing to the rhythm of laughter, if that makes sense. I don't know, this seems like a conflation of a few common things. First of all, laughter is an insanely common hallucination. It's also something that we just hear a lot. And also, lights, quote-unquote, dancing or moving is super common. I mean, if you stare at a light long enough, it'll kind of move. Please don't do that, that's very bad for you. But, you mix drugs and substances or sleep deprivation into the mix, and it all seems plausible that this could result in an amalgamation of those things, forming some sort of unique hallucination. The TV people. These are commonly associated with DPH use. They're not actually people who walk out of a TV, but are instead people that look staticky or glitchy, or maybe go through repetitive motions and fake conversations. When I researched my DPH iceberg, one of the things that came up all the time was that people's hallucinations seemed to be like TV static. As in, you would feel staticky like pins and needles, you'd hear droning noises, the scene was a little black and white or shades of gray, and the room just seemed fuzzy and staticky. I theorized that was why spiders and bugs are such a common hallucination when on DPH. Because if all the walls look staticky or you feel staticky, you might interpret them as a bunch of little flies or bugs or something. Many DPH trip simulations and even memes show this type of scene. But yeah, imagine that, but with people involved. Clockwork beings. Clockwork beings are mechanical or insectoid-looking beings associated with DMT, LSD, and ketamine. They often show up appearing like they are constructing reality, similar to the machine elves. Cheshire Grin. The Cheshire Grin is a being, or perhaps just a face, with an extremely stretched grin. They don't necessarily jump scare you or hurt you, but they appear extremely unnatural. The name Cheshire Grin comes from the Cheshire Cat, a character from Alice in Wonderland. There are reports of hallucinating the cat as well, but like I said, it could be a person, face, or just the smile. Generally, these are seen as uncanny and uncomfortable, but nothing more. The Light Being. The Light Being is an extremely well-known DMT or psilocybin entity. It's basically described as God or some sort of cosmic being or messenger. Encounters with the Light Being may bring with them some extreme comfort or wisdom. This is about the best thing you could see while tripping, the ultimate good, and it's usually pleasurable or happy. Occasionally, the Light Being is less about just giving pleasure and more about delivering a message. But this changes from person to person. In one report on Reddit, someone describes it as being a gift bearer. I heard a voice. They greet me, I greet them back. I'm in pure ecstasy. I have never been more happy to have met someone. A telepathic essence of voice pierces my soul. We brought you a gift, if you want it. I give back the strongest freeing, polite yes my soul could muster, and I nod. Afterwards, he explained that he felt good about life and realized he shouldn't worry about so many things. On the whole, this hallucination probably results in a good trip. I haven't heard any examples of it being an illusion that turned into something else, or it being otherwise malignant. The Spiral Man. The Spiral Man, associated with opioid use, is described as, a man made of swirls or spirals. Spirals are pretty common to hallucinate in general, and you might perceive your immediate environment in the form of spirals when sleep deprived or while high, so it's probably just a combination of that and humanoid figures. The Grid Keepers. Grid keepers are generally neutral entities who may oversee your trip or somehow feel in control. They may guide you or show you how things work, but a lot of people say that they just ignore you. The clacker. The clacker, associated with meth or stimulants, is described as an auditory hallucination where one hears a clacking sound getting closer and closer. It's often associated with the feeling of being watched or stalked, and may actually turn into a full visual hallucination. Generally, this leaves people feeling uncomfortable and paranoid. Forest spirits. Forest spirits are associated with ayahuasca, psilocybin, or mescaline. They are more, quote-unquote, natural or outdoorsy figures. They might look like little fairies, or talking trees or bushes, or even animals with human or human-like intelligence. These are partially associated with the fact that peyote and mushrooms and ayahuasca tend to be taken outside, so there's definitely an environmental effect here. The Tall Man. The Tall Man, associated with DPH and sleep paralysis, as well as nightmares, is almost exactly the same as the Hat Man. He behaves the same way, being menacing and creepy, but not necessarily directly antagonistic, and he's often made of shadows. For this reason, he's often mixed into the lore of other things like the Hat Man or Slender Man because of those similarities. DPH spiders. This is a big one. If you look at all into DPH abuse, spiders show up everywhere. I even put one on my video thumbnail. DPH spiders are a very common sight when abusing that drug, and they can also just show up in nightmares or sleep deprivation. In terms of DPH though, scientifically, this may occur because the drug makes you feel tingly in the skin. Have you ever, had a weird itch and smacked or shook yourself because you thought a bug was on you? It's sort of like that, but the feeling is all over, so your brain gets convinced that it's spiders. One survey on Reddit showed that of those who felt they were hallucinating while taking DPH, over 70% of them mentioned spiders. It suggested that you can consistently see them at around 300 to 500 milligrams of a DPH dose, which is about 20 pills of Benadryl. The chrysanthemum entity. This is a big one. The chrysanthemum entity is a sentient fractal object which is often guarding a deeper level, so to speak, of one's DPH trip. They are often incomprehensibly colorful and complex. Described as dome-like, they either block you from more experience and enlightenment, or open you up to breakthrough hyperspace. A DMT wiki describes breakthrough like this: the state the traveler achieves after ingesting the breakthrough dose of DMT. A singularity beyond life or death. Beyond time or space or known dimensions. Inherently synesthetic. Ultra-sharp edges and highly polished surfaces. Hard crystallization and electric crackling. Endless morphing and fractalizing details. A sense of extremely high energy and vibration, as well as frantic activity. All one. Feels oddly familiar. Maybe where you were before birth and will return after death. Everything that ever is, has been, can be, will be, never was, never could be. Then they go on to describe hyperspace as the place you go after breakthrough. Can be any place in time imaginable, where the impossible can easily happen, extreme geometric explosions of color, sound, emotions, information, and also the feeling of it being hyper-real. This entity, therefore, is a lot like a doorway. It may examine you for worthiness before letting you through. This specifically is where a lot of DMT art comes from. Terence McKenna, who I mentioned before, described it initially like this. And then, these colors begin racing together, and it forms this mandala, slowly rotating thing, which I call the chrysanthemum. this is a place in the trip that you want to see as you go by it. And the chrysanthemum forms and you watch it for like 15 seconds. If it doesn't give way, then you didn't get enough. You have to do more. One more hit. This is often considered a rite of passage for DMT users. The Cosmic Mother. Much like the Soft Lady, but more grandiose, encompassing, and without form, the Cosmic Mother is described by users of psilocybin, ayahuasca, and DMT as a maternal goddess, providing feelings of nurture and comfort. It's described as being made of space-related matter, like a universe full of stars, or occasionally vines and plant matter. On that same DMT wiki, it's described like this: a huge, bright, feminine goddess. Might be identified with Ostara, Isis, or Mother Mary, yet transcending identification with these earthly images. Bright, really bright light, caring, loving, caressing away all pain and all tears. A coloniculoscopic experience with an explicit feminine character. I would be really interested in seeing if people from different cultures, say Western or not, would see different maternal figures like that mentioned. I can imagine Americans and Europeans seeing the Virgin Mary, but other people may be seeing different stuff. For the Freudian and symbolically curious of you, there's also sometimes connection to sexual imagery, as in the mother might appear like a part of a woman's body, or maybe not a sexual part, but say hips, eyes, or a mouth. Serpent beings. Serpent beings are especially associated with ayahuasca, and if you see one, they might appear to sway or move with a rhythm, somehow bound or connected to your trip itself. They often appear like learned shamans or teachers who share knowledge with you. Lots of people see snakes or serpents in one way or another, either being humans with serpentine qualities or just normal snakes when they do ayahuasca. We don't really know why this is. Traditionally, snake symbolism is related to ayahuasca, but if you didn't know that beforehand, I can't conjure an explanation for seeing serpents in particular, as opposed to how DPH spiders sort of have an explanation. I don't know, let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Man with No Hands. The man with no hands is often associated with DPH and nightmares, often associated with tragedy as well. He's seen reaching out towards you or something else, but his wrists are just stumps and he can't grab anything. Especially in dreams, this could be symbolic of many things. He also might sort of be a shadow person in general or similar to the Hat Man, but the difference here is that he's trying to communicate something with you, but he just can't. The Old Woman. The Old Woman, or the Old Hag, is a really interesting hallucination or nightmare. There's this weird pattern of people seeing an old hag or witch or whatnot, but similar to that, something feminine and old and raggedy and scary, standing over them during sleep paralysis. I've had sleep paralysis, but I've never seen anything personally. There's literally a Wikipedia page about this and articles talking about the old hag. It really is super common. Some people literally call sleep paralysis old hag syndrome. An old hag or witch is an extremely common antagonist in literature and such, but why she comes up so frequently in sleep paralysis specifically, I can't say. Let me know if you've seen her before. I'd be interested in hearing that. Architects. Architects associated with LSD, ketamine, and DMT are entities which appear to be supernatural and hyper-intelligent, sort of building your experience, hence the architect name. These are very similar to grid keepers and machine elves. The Watchers. This is a pretty broad entry. Watchers are creatures associated with salvia and DMT, or potentially just things you might see during sleep paralysis. They're creatures of varying visual appearance or form that just watch over you. I've seen them described as shadow people, gray aliens, or even things without form, just being a feeling. The Curtain People. For the last entry on the iceberg today, we have the Curtain People. The Curtain People, which can be seen after using DPH or Datura, are shadowy people which hide in corners or behind curtains, then disappear when you look at them. This is their key quality differentiating them from other forms of shadow people, their elusiveness. Much like one of those squiggles on your eye, you can never really get a proper look at them. This leads people to think they might be taking advantage of you, increasing feelings of paranoia. Somehow, you just know that they're having a laugh at you or judging you, but you can't talk to them. Okay guys, that last entry marks the end of today's iceberg. Let me know if you enjoyed it, and especially let me know if you yourself have ever encountered any of these things. Also, after doing this, I'm considering making an iceberg on just DMT entities, since there are so many of those and other things related to that type of stuff, so let me know in the comments if you'd want to see that. I really enjoyed this quick video, and there's more to come, so please consider subscribing. I also want to direct you to my second channel where I do some IRL and travel stuff. I'd really appreciate if you subscribe to that so I can get it to 1,000 subs as soon as I can. Also, consider joining the Seed Butter Discord where we talk about videos like this. Consider becoming a Patreon member as well. Patreon members got to watch this video early, and they're thanked in every single video. As always, thank you for your continued viewership, and I hope you had a fun time. Good night, guys.